Great. So today I'm joined by three fabulous panelists who are bringing their experience and expertise to this discussion about zero energy and energy efficient affordable housing. We'll dive into this topic by examining the Sheridan Small Homes, which is One Neighborhood Builders' development of 5 affordable zero energy small homes in the Olneyville neighborhood of Providence. To provide us some context on the small homes to start, we're going to view a brief video.
Welcome to Sheridan Small Homes, Rhode Island's first affordable and passive house certified development, built with the belief that people, regardless of their income, want to live in smaller, energy-efficient homes.
When we set out to develop Sheridan Small Homes, we wanted to test 3 different elements. That we could develop a small cluster of these homes on 3/4 of an acre of land, and that people would want to purchase a home living in community with others. That we could develop these homes to the highest green standard, passive house certification, and do so affordably. And we believed we would find people who wanted to live in smaller homes, and we were right.
We're in a place in our world where we've reached a reckoning where we really have to care about how we approach the world, how we live in the world.
These 2-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom homes feature 750 square feet of living space. The homes were sold for an average of $143,000, making them affordable for a 3-person household with an annual
That's a lot of money.
$55,000. Though slowed by the COVID-19 pandemic, Sheridan Small Homes were completed in the fall of 2021. To its residents, the development offers the pride that comes from ownership, protecting the environment, and building community.
The history of Olneyville is inextricably linked to the history of industry and manufacturing due to the Woonasquatucket River. This property, which is adjacent to the river, was environmentally contaminated. We had to remediate the soils in order to make the property appropriate for building the houses on. I think that's our obligation, and I'm proud that we were able to do that.
The Sheridan Small Homes concept began in 2018, when One Neighborhood Builders set out to design and develop a model home that could fit on the many small lots scattered across Providence. Once we had a home designed, we decided it would be best to cluster a few together to create a community. We settled on developing 5 homes on 3/4 of an acre in Olneyville, between the Woonasquatucket River Greenway and properties along King Street. To reduce the construction costs of these so that they could be sold at a price that is affordable for a low-income household, One Neighborhood Builders collaborated with the Rhode Island School of Design's Architecture Studio and Building Futures, a construction training program. These partners helped us to save on architectural services and construction labor. The design was modified after hearing what people in the community wanted: a great room with high ceilings, a porch or balcony, and full-size appliances. To achieve Passive House certified standards, they were built with shallow concrete slab foundations, large triple-pane windows that let in the sunlight to brighten and help heat the living space, and airtight construction for exceptionally efficient heating and cooling. The homes were built in a south-facing arc with 78 solar panels that produce enough energy to sell back to the electrical grid to reduce the owner's condominium fees by over $600 per month. Since the homes are airtight, overall homeowner electrical costs are much less than in an average home.
I appreciate that One Neighborhood Builder has created this community where we can be in a shared communal space, where we can really raise our family in the presence of natural beauty and parks and city, and I look forward to a lot more of these kind of communities popping up.
For more information about Sheridan Small Homes, visit oneneighborhoodbuilders.org.
you all found that to be a helpful primer on the Sheridan Small Homes. And with that, I'd like to kick it to our first panelist, each of whom I will introduce as we go. Milton Baxter is the Director of Real Estate at One Neighborhood Builders. Milton, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why applying innovative design standards and approaches is important to One Neighborhood Builders in its efforts to advance affordable housing?
Sure. Thank you, Grace. I caught myself smiling during the video there, particularly when the homeowner was talking about their experience there. And I think that that's really why we look to apply innovative strategies around developing affordable housing and incorporating sustainability into those developments. And it's because our mission is to provide affordable housing, and I think we have a responsibility to try to provide that affordable housing in the most sustainable and responsible manner that we can, given all of the dynamics that go into developing any kind of real estate, whether it's affordable or not. So we believe that's an important part of what our mission is. Beyond the idea of just creating and producing units, it's to do them responsibly with thoughts of how the built environment is going to affect the environment that they're built in, and how the lived experience will be for the residents that live there. In this case, these are homeowners. In a lot of the developments that we have rentals. And in both instances, it's important to kind of start with the end in mind and understand what the lived experiences will be. And I think that all of those factors sort of fed into the ultimate design and execution around Sheridan Small Homes. You want to start with the idea of developing good, safe, affordable housing, and then to do it in a manner that adds sustainability was an important goal. And I think that, at the end of this event today, I think everyone will agree. I think that we executed on that pretty well. So,
thank you, Milton. And John, I'm going to kick it to you next. So John Erickson's an account manager at Clear Result and a builder and a passive house certifier. Can you introduce yourself a little bit more? And then when we talk about terms like zero energy and passive house and energy efficient, can you tell us, what does that really mean? Oh, you're on mute, John. John, we can't hear you.
I said, sure. My name is John Erickson. I work with Clear Result. My role with Sheridan was I was the account manager for National Grid's new construction incentive program. So I was the HERS rater at Sheridan, but I also served as the passive house verifier and verifier for Zero Energy Ready Homes and Energy Star as well. So I was heavily involved in this project as the third-party rater and testing the houses as well. So just in general terms, when we're talking about zero energy and high performance construction, I think that a lot of people immediately, like their initial idea of what that is just a house that has reduced energy, right? But there's a bunch of other things that you're trying to accomplish when you're building these buildings. So reduced energy efficiency is one of them, but also all of the things that you do in order to achieve that goal also result in improved long-term durability, improved interior comfort overall, improved resiliency of the house, short-term and long-term, and also results in a healthier indoor environment. So these are sort of the ultimate goals of what you're doing when you're building a high-performance home. And achieving that is really, it comes down to three things. The first is building the house as airtight as you can and having a good, well-designed, balanced ventilation system, right? That's one thing. Those two things are one thing. You can't have one without the other, right? Second thing is having really, really good windows, as good as you can get them, preferably triple pane like they did at Sheridan. And then the third thing is super insulating the home. And by that, I don't mean By super, I don't mean putting in a lot of insulation. It's about how you design the insulation, how you design your assemblies, right? It is increasing the R value, yes, but making sure that you're doing it correctly and designing them correctly and reducing as much of the thermal bridging as you can. And when you do those three things, then the result are all those other things I talked about at the beginning.
Thank you, John. And I have a feeling we're going to get into some of those things you noted in a little bit more detail as we talk here. But I first want to introduce Melissa Marin, who is one of the homeowners of one of the 5 Sheridan small homes. Melissa, can you introduce yourself and then just talk to us about the lived experience, as Milton noted, of being a Sheridan small home owner and what you enjoy about it.
Good morning. It's very nice to meet everyone and be a part of this Fresh Friday. So I've been living here since about November of 2021. When I was listening, John, to your explanations, those are all the things that I really love about the home. So let's start with the windows. The windows let in a lot of light, but they're super insulated. We're in a live neighborhood. What does that mean? That means that, like, from Minton Street above, it's a very kind of a lot of music, a lot of, different communities. So once you come down to where our homes are, the insulation really helps because I don't hear anything. I don't hear anything at night. I don't hear anything during the day. Maybe now because the weather has gotten nicer and I've been opening the windows, but definitely in the winter, it was like, I'm living in Providence, because again, you just didn't hear anything, which was great. So I really love the windows. I really love the design. I'd never been in a home where there had been like concrete floors. Everyone that comes here is like, what is this? Like, what kind of design is this? A lot of the materials that were used in the home weren't even recognized by the insurance company when I had to call and get like home insurance, because a lot of the materials were so new. They had to like verify and, well, we've never heard of that. What's this? So that was pretty cool. I think for people like me personally, who never envisioned themselves owning a home, I just never to travel. I like to do other things. I was like, I don't need a house. And then I met Belinda from one neighborhood, and we started talking numbers and what do I do and things. And she's like, well, I have something for you if you want to come check it out. And then here we are. Fast forward to ownership. The whole process was a lot easier than I thought it would be, because one neighborhood helped me so much with like paperwork, with the mortgage company, with the bank. It was just all a very kind of smoother process, I would say, than if I were to have done it on my own, because again, I didn't want to be in this game. I didn't want to, be a part of this kind of process. So having one neighborhood as a support was also very beneficial for, like I said, someone like me.
Thank you, Melissa. Really appreciate you sharing your experience. I'm going to pass it back to Milton to talk a little bit more about sort of the process of developing the Sheridan small homes. Milton, can you share anything that was sort of unusual or any special approaches that One Neighborhood builders and our team of organizations that worked with us to execute this project that were used in really its design?
Sure. So I think, at the outset of any development that we engage in, we're looking to do a couple of things, right? First is we want to add as much value to the development as we possibly can. And that comes in different forms. In this particular case, one of the forms in which value was added was the approach regarding sustainability and developing the project with this zero energy sort of model. Passive house standards together with solar as contributing to the condominium fees, as was mentioned in the video. And those were sort of the value propositions, if you will, for the development. And the other thing we want to do is try to save money, right? So not only money for the development, but also understanding, as I mentioned at the opening, the lived experience for the tenants, and how can we make, or in this case, the owners, how can we make that the best possible outcome for them, right? And so what we had decided to do was build the property to passive house standards, incorporate solar. And so the solar panels are on each unit, but the solar energy that's sold back to the grid actually reduces the condominium association costs for all of the owners. So that helps save money for them. We were also looking for ways to save money during the course of the development, which is why we used a RISD professor of architecture and their students to help with the design and construction drawings and those types of services that we typically pay a lot more money to for a professional architecture and engineering firm. We also hired Buildings Futures, who charges a lower flat fee for construction services. Building Futures is a apprenticeship program, building trades apprenticeship program that provides paths for individuals who are interested in the trades to actually get hands-on experience. And so it was a quid pro quo with them because we gave them an opportunity to work on an interesting project using advanced building materials, as Melissa was mentioning, and advanced construction techniques that they might not get on a traditional build, and also the traditional build experience. So that was part of the strategy as well. We also leveraged some repurposed donated material. We eliminated all natural gas from the project, so we didn't have any permitting or gas piping that had to be brought to the site. We excluded basements from the project to reduce excavation costs. As it was mentioned, this was an environmentally impacted site. And so when you excavate in an environmentally impacted site, there are additional costs that are associated with that, handling materials, removing materials off site. And so in order to contain the costs, we did a slab on grade foundation. And then, of course, as John was mentioning, we focused on the insulation and air tightness of the building as part of that passive house design standards that we executed on. So those were a host of the sort of design strategies that we use in executing this process.
Thank you, Milton. John, a question for you. You have worked on a lot of projects around the state and perhaps more broadly, focused on increasing energy efficiency. And earlier you mentioned sort of the three primary strategies or elements of a project that support energy efficiency. Was there anything about this project that was unusual or new or kind of took those strategies to a new level?
Yeah, for sure. There were a number of things that were definitely uncommon building practice for Rhode Island, but not necessarily uncommon building practice for high performance construction. You know, we see exterior insulation on houses. We see triple pane windows. We see builders building very tight mechanical ventilation, et cetera. The one thing that I think was particularly unusual for Sheridan and very uncommon for Rhode Island was the frost protected shallow foundation that they used. This detail is common in places where in much colder climates where you have a very short excavation season because the ground is typically frozen year round. And how it works is you've got rigid insulation board that extends away from the foundation. And what that does is it keeps that thermal energy from the ground under the house. So in essence, what you're doing is you're taking the frost line, which in Rhode Island is around 48 inches, and you're moving it up to about 18 inches. And the result of this is the greatest piece of this really is the cost savings, right? So now you don't need to excavate down to 4 feet. You're using less concrete, less formwork, less rebar, less labor. The whole thing is ultimately less expensive, but also less of a carbon footprint because we know that concrete has a very high global warming potential overall, has a big carbon footprint in the manufacturing process of concrete. So that's one thing that that I was very excited to see on this project. This is the kind of thing that will raise the eyebrow of the building inspector, though, for sure. And he's going to say, I've never seen that. I need some engineering for that, right? So, but I'd love to see more builders using this style of construction in Rhode Island.
Thank you. And John, I'm going to keep it on you for one more moment, because folks who are looking at the chat may have noticed there's a little ventilation conversation happening.
Oh, boy.
And I know ventilation is obviously a big piece of this project, and that also some challenges arose over the course of the project as it related to ventilation. And I think in a spirit of sharing the stuff that worked and the stuff that was difficult, I would like, John, for you to kind of weigh in on how that played out.
Okay, the first thing just to respond, Dominic, to your comment about a house needs to breathe. This is an older sort of saying that we've all heard a million times, right? So in Rhode Island, there is a mechanical ventilation code requirement for all new homes. You can do that by putting a timer on your bath fan. That's called exhaust only ventilation, or you could do balanced ventilation with an ERV or an HRV. And the reason for it is because ultimately, what you're trying to achieve with ventilation, right? When you're ventilating your home, you're trying to take all of the stale air out of the house and replace it with fresh air a certain amount of times per day, right? ASHRAE 62.2 wants you to do that 5 to 6 times per day, right? All of the volume of air getting replaced with fresh air. And really, relying on the cracks in your walls and windows is not going to get that job done properly, right? You're going to be sitting in stale air. At certain times of the year, you'll be sitting in stale air for most of the time. And also, you're basically, you don't know, you have no idea what your ventilation rate is. Now you put in a ventilation system, even just a exhaust only timer on your bath fan. Now you know how much fresh air you're pulling into the house and extracting. So that's the concept of build tight, ventilate right. By code, you have to have mechanical ventilation in your house. So why not build the house as tight as you can? Now, what happened at Sheridan, the ventilation was a big challenge at Sheridan but for a different reason. So in Rhode Island, there is this ventilation code, but there's no code for amount of flow. You just need to have a system installed, right? That's something that we'd like to improve down the road. But for now, just having that in the code is fine. But with Energy Star, there are certain requirements for exhaust ventilation in your bathrooms and in your kitchen. You must have a certain amount of flow in your bath fans in your kitchen when I test it. At Sheridan, they used the mechanical fresh air ventilation system as the exhaust for the bathrooms in the kitchen. They didn't have a dedicated bath fan or dedicated range hood, which is very common in high performance construction. A lot of these guys do this. The problem is this. For multifamily construction, typically you can hire an MEP who's going to design the system, do a manual D for the ducts, and get all those flows perfect, right? In residential single family construction, it's very hard to find someone that is going to come in and design the system and do a full manual D and put all the fittings on the ducts and design it perfectly so that you'll get the flows. So they struggled to get the proper flows out of their bathroom and kitchen exhaust. And we had to go through they had to go through a bunch of iterations of trying to change the ducting to get it to work. And we had to come and test it a bunch of times. And it took a while to do it. And I think the big mistake was that we didn't address this before the sheetrock went on, or they didn't address before the sheetrock went on. And then all the changes had to happen sort of with the sheetrock there, which makes it a lot more difficult. But ultimately, Pinnacle they were excellent in going through the iterations and getting it done right. And they eventually accomplished what they needed to for those flows in the bathrooms and kitchen. So long story, but that's what happened.
Thank you for sharing. And I think it really speaks to the challenges that will undoubtedly arise when trying to do something new or kind of push the envelope on design. Melissa, I wanted to ask you, so you mentioned earlier about, even the insurance company being surprised by some of the features. And we were just talking,
Oof.
John was just sharing about.
Yeah, they were
They were
impressed
confused.
by most of the materials. They were like, "What's that?" I was like, "Oh, I don't know. This is what they gave me."
So the question I was interested in your thoughts on is, all these newfangled bells and whistles that, maybe you're not super familiar with and the insurance folks aren't even familiar with. What's your experience been like of sort of learning or trial and error, and how has that kind of impacted your time living in the house since November?
That's funny that you asked, because one of the first things when I moved in, because everything is so new, like the all the appliances and everything. So we're talking the stove, the fridge, the washer, the dryer. I didn't know how to speak anything. It was like, I had to study these books because they're super advanced as far as like being touch and all these things. So I didn't know how to make anything in the stove for like the first week. I didn't know how to wash clothes. It was just a learning curve. But yeah, I would probably say that was something that was a little unexpected, because again, I just had to learn the language of every appliance and, the best settings, because again, it's also advanced. So it has like all these little kind of options that I'd never really used before, the fridge especially. And so also I wanted to ask, straight from the source, what is the floor specifically? It's not just concrete, is it? Is it a mixture?
In
That
terms
question
of
for
the,
Milton?
in terms of the materials that we use?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't know the technical
Oh,
specifications of the materials. John might be able to answer a little bit more, but I know that, the materials that were specified for the very specific reason that they are high performance and they are used in construction processes that are designed to have certain results. And so, and I think beyond the materials too, is, as John was mentioning, there's under slab insulation there as well that exists underneath the materials. So I think it's,
okay, thanks, Jennifer.
I think that might be what you're noticing, is because it is, it is a concrete product that gets polished. It may feel and look different than regular concrete because of the insulation factor. It doesn't get cold.
Can I weigh in on that for a second? So one of the key components to comfort in a home is the ability to keep the surface temperatures of all the different assemblies and materials within about 8 degrees of each other. When you're in a house and you feel cold because you're standing in front of a few bad windows, it's because the heat in your body is trying to heat up that window, right? You're not feeling the cold coming in. The heat from your body is leaving and trying to heat up those pieces. So the room might be, the thermostat might say 68 degrees, but those windows are like a hole in a bucket. You can think of it that way. And the heat from your body's trying to leave through that hole. So at Sheridan, when you've got triple pane glass windows with a U factor of, I think they were 0.17, and you've got super insulated concrete, right? These things typically, without that insulation under that concrete, that that concrete would be very cold, and it would be a condensation risk because it would be dropping below dew point. But because that slab is encapsulated in so much insulation, the slab is essentially room temperature or close to it. So you can walk on it barefoot, it's going to be warm, and you're not going to know that it's even concrete. And that might be the reason why you're like, is this concrete? This is so warm. And it's got that nice
like a garage floor, for example, when you go out and it's like this super freezing. No, not this concrete. No.
Yeah, the concrete at Sheridan is essentially encased in insulation on all sides, including the perimeter, which is the really critical piece of the slab to insulate, right? Because from the bottom, the ground is kind of serving as a buffer, but from the sides, you're exposed to ambient air. If it's 0 degrees outside, the edge of that slab is 0 degrees. So you want to insulate the perimeter of that slab as well. And that's probably why, in conjunction with the fact that it's got a nice finish on it, you know, doesn't really look like concrete, but it doesn't behave like concrete either, right?
Yeah, it has like these, it kind of looks like art, to be quite honest, because
Yeah,
it has these kind of imperfections like throughout the floor where either the color varies or the, you know, the texture, the color. Yeah, it's just like the colors of the gray, and it has like maroon in some areas. It's a very natural looking kind of resource.
Yeah.
Thank you all. We're just about 10 minutes left in our session today. Somehow, amazingly, the time is flying. So I want to start transitioning to questions from folks who have joined us here. I'm going to start with one that is in the chat, and then other folks can feel free to either continue to add things into the chat, or you're welcome to unmute yourself and raise a question after we respond to this first one. So Rochelle asked if replacement costs for the appliances and the thermostats and the heating system and other kind of newer technologies that are in the house will be more expensive than usual, and what homeowners, and this is my interpretation, what homeowners might expect as it relates to that sort of replacement need. I don't know if this is a question for Milton or John. Feel free to jump in.
I think that's a John question.
Yeah, I mean, the heating and cooling is just a air source heat pump mini split, which are very common at this point in time. So it's I'd say the one thing in the house that would be a little more extensive to repair are the windows, right? Because they're triple pane Zola windows, which were shipped in from Poland. And so in order to replace a broken pane, they do have a presence in the United States, but it would take a long time to get the piece. But then again, right now, everyone's having trouble with windows. But those windows are shipped over from Europe, so that would take a little longer. But the rest of the house, there's nothing. The ERV is a Panasonic ERV. It's not, it's not an uncommon unit. The dryer is a heat pump dryer, so it's a little more, might be more expensive to fix, but not hard to get parts for. The hot water heater is just a standard resistance hot water heater, electric, so that's just a very common. So yeah, I don't think that there's a lot of outside of the windows. There wouldn't be too much extra to having to repair things in the house.
Thank you, John.
So don't let any kids throw rocks near the house, Melissa.
Any other questions that folks might have? While you all continue to think, Jessica just noted a question in the chat. Wondering if there's been a lot of interest in the smaller size of the house. I think that would be both a question for Melissa. Folks are interested and intrigued by the small house model, and maybe also Milton, if you have anything to share about that.
Melissa, do you want to start?
Sure. I love the size of the home. I find it to be perfect, especially to clean. I see these big houses. I'm like, who's cleaning that house? I get this place done, and so anyway, it's a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath. I have very high ceilings. I have an outside patio. I also have another kind of sitting area from my room. I have a glass door that I have another patio there. I find the size to be just fine, but that's just me. I also think that the neighbors feel the same from what I gather in talking with them.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think the trend in real estate development in general is smaller apartment sizes, house sizes, for all of the reasons that Melissa mentioned. I think that, and also cost factors too, right? So cost not only to build, but also cost to maintain, heat, all of those types of things, particularly in non-passive house designed projects. But, it's very common. And I think part of it is lifestyle changes. People are doing more outside of the home. I know during COVID, we were sort of home centered. But I think in general, the idea is people are doing more outside of their homes, and the need for space is less, and then the idea of saving money around cleaning and utilities and heating and all of those types of things. So that there is a lifestyle move toward smaller design. And with the advent of really advanced design techniques and very thoughtful design, you can make a space feel much larger than it is with high ceilings and all, the types of things that Melissa mentioned. So yes, I think that there is an interest, to answer Jessica's question directly.
That was something I wanted to mention earlier too, that Jonathan Knowles, the architect for this from RISD, who designed this with the students, he told me early on, one of the design elements that they put into this house is, and now that I say this, Melissa, you're going to notice this every time you're walking around, is that every time that you turn a corner, there's a window. So as soon as you walk into the house, there's a window. When you turn up the stairs, there's a window. When you turn into a bathroom, there's a window. And that daylighting, where every corner you turn, there's daylighting, it makes the house feel bigger. And after he told me that, I was like, oh, it's true. That works. It's kind of cool. I'm not an architect, so maybe that's normal, but I thought that was pretty neat.
So Grace, this is Dominic. I'd really like to hear an answer to Stephanie's question, which is, how do you let air into the house? Because I think opening a window probably defeats the purpose of a controlled ventilation. So how do you get the air in? I get the blowing out, that's simple enough, but what's the intake process?
So
That's a John question.
These houses have a Panasonic ERV, which is an energy recovery ventilator. So there are 2 ducts on the outside of the house, like dryer vents, right? One of them is for exhaust air and one of them is for supply air. And the unit is a box up in the attic space. And the fresh air the stale air that's leaving, they cross streams and they don't touch, but the energy of the stale air gets passed to the energy that's coming in. So, to a certain percentage, I think these are 80-something% efficient. So 80% of that heat or cooling, whatever season it is, gets passed to the air coming in. So you're not just ejecting like your conditioned air. And the unit has 2 fans, one is pulling in and one is pushing out. And then those 2 streams of air go through a core, like a heat exchanger, as they go through, and they exchange heat and a little bit of moisture going through.
That sounds a lot like the science of capillaries, which I never really understood either. This idea that air can pass and change characteristics from the other, but not really touch, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, well,
Let me show you the vent from
like
this room.
like a copper pipe, right? Like, how about think of an indirect water tank off of your gas boiler, right? That tank's got a copper pipe in it, right? And the water in that copper pipe is not touching the water in the tank, but it's heating it up. Right. It's a similar kind of concept, but just with air. And
Thank you, John. And
well.
for those who were watching, Melissa just gave us a little visual of what the vent looks like in her
This room, yeah. But then, like, for example, in the bedroom, the vents are like horizontal. They're like kind of right where your head goes, and they're like 2 horizontal side by side, like 6 inches, and then they have like 3 little vents. So there's 2 styles of vents. There's that circle one, and then there's the one like I mentioned in the room that's a little bit different.
Yeah, so typically you supply fresh air into the bedrooms, and you pull stale air out of the bathrooms and kitchens, where you'd be, creating cooking particles and moisture and things like that.
There's one more question in the chat, and I'm going to actually make this our last question because we're coming up on 9:30 here, which is the fan noisy, Melissa?
I was just typing back, it's a fan because it doesn't make any noise. No, it doesn't make any noise at all.
It's
Thank
only,
you.
it's only pushing like 80 CFM. It's a low flow system, so it shouldn't be making any noise. And also it's all the way up in the crawl space attic, so it's far from the living space, right?
Thank you all for your engagement and interest in this topic, and huge thanks to our three panelists. Milton, thank you. John, thanks for bringing all the knowledge around the specifics of this house. And Melissa, thanks for the tour, in addition to being so excited and enthusiastic about these homes, which I think brought a smile to all of our faces. I'm going to drop in the chat a link to a case study that One Neighborhood Builders has published on the Sheridan Small Home project. You can also find this on One Neighborhood Builders website, as well as a bunch of other content about Sheridan Small Homes and other projects that we're working on, including the video that you saw earlier today. I'd like to invite all of you to join us for future Fresh Friday events. Our goal is to host them on the third Friday of every month, focused on a different topic that relates to some projects that we're working on, things that we're learning, things that we're excited about getting all of your input and feedback on. The next date is June 17th, and then we'll have another one on July 15th. Some of the upcoming topics that we're considering are community Wi-Fi and the digital divide, and community health workers as an important part of community building work. Please look for program announcements in the weeks to come. Thank you, everyone.
Grace. Thank you.
Have a great Friday.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.